Hello, good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome back for day 3 of our National Education Summit. For those who might need a visual description, today I am wearing the same blue t-shirt. It's actually a different blue t-shirt. We have two, but a blue t-shirt with a black jacket. I have on blue jeans. I am an African-American woman with curly hair, and I'm joining you today from the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden Auditorium. Welcome back. Well, I want to know, how's it been going? Awesome, pretty good. Okay, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I'd like to first offer a land acknowledgement and say that we are grateful for the Native peoples whose ancestral homelands we hold our event on today. And we want to just recognize the diverse and vibrant community across the nation and say that we're grateful for the opportunity to be here today. Well, I thought that before we jump into our first session, what we would do is do a little recap. We have a lot of great content to get to, so I don't want to take a long time. But just to refocus us and bring us back in for the last day, the summit theme is Together We Thrive, Fostering on a Sense of Belonging. And over the course of the last 2 days, we've had an opportunity to hear from our Smithsonian educators and experts, and also our collaborating partners around 4 main themes: life on a sustainable planet, STEAM education, reckoning with our racial past, and integrated arts education. Each of these different presenters has walked us through very pragmatic resources that help us center these conversations in our classroom, and also helped us to focus on fostering a sense of belonging. If we think back through some of our keynotes, our first night we had an opportunity to talk with Secretary Lonnie Bunch, Jamar Roundtree, and also Curtis Valentine. And some of my takeaways from that session I wanted to share with you. You know, one of the things that we know about education, especially public education systems, is that we definitely need more money for funding, right? But what struck me is that when they talked about how to center the experiences of Black male youth and the things that would help them connect and foster a sense of belonging, none of those things actually took money. They talked about the importance of having adults see them and how that supported their nurture and development. They also talked about the importance of having people around them that had a vision for themselves that they had not yet envisioned for themselves. They talked about the importance of community and family, and how that community can take many different shapes and forms. Jamar talked about the Boys and Girls Club. They also, Jamar in particular, talked about being vulnerable and the importance of giving voice to the things that are both joy and sometimes challenging, and as a representation for youth that are watching us and modeling after us, and the importance of that vulnerability and sharing that the human experience is one of ups and downs, and that the important thing is that you pick yourself back up and keep going forward. And so that vulnerability of being open to that. I was so moved by Rebecca Peterson. She was such a dynamic individual, wasn't she? She's just amazing. And I really took from her the importance of focusing on at least one good thing each day. The joy that comes from that, and that you can actually start to remap your brain and focus on positivity and joy. And then that dynamic conversation with Malik Pancholi and Andrea Kim Neighbors yesterday. It was funny because I was talking with my mom afterwards, and she, I think she fell asleep during part of it. And so she said, "So he started off as a white man and then ended up as a Black man?" I said, "No, Mom, I think you missed it totally." So my takeaway from that, sorry, Mom, if you're watching, I apologize for using you. But my takeaway from that was that he really struggled with his identity in terms of trying to find the place where he fit, and through assimilation thought that that would be the way in which he fit and could find belonging. But recognized that that actually was tearing away from his essence and his spirit, and that it was only when he fully embraced who he fully was that he was really able to authentically step into himself. So I'm hoping that today, with the opportunities that we have with our keynote sessions and the breakout sessions, that we will continue this journey together about thinking about thriving together and fostering a sense of belonging, And really, what are the instructional resources that we have in our toolkit that help to support and facilitate that? You know, I'm so fortunate that Dr. Pamela Cantor agreed to join us for the summit. Dr. Cantor is a physician, an author, and a thought leader in the science of learning and development. And she also focuses on human potential. She has practiced child and adult psychiatry for nearly 2 decades, specializing in trauma. She's also the founder of an organization called Turnaround for Children, which was founded in 2002. She has co-authored a study that looked at the impact of the 9/11 attacks on New York City school children. She's also just recently published 2 books, and in these books, she crystallizes the key scientific concepts about how human potential and learning unfold so that anyone, and she really does make this accessible, anyone seeking to open pathways for learning and opportunity for young people can do so. In her own story, she has surmounted significant barriers to find her place and her voice in science. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Cantor to the stage. Welcome, Dr. Cantor.
Unmute. Good, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you really well. Thank you.
It's wonderful to be here. So there are a lot of reasons why a person would want to go to medical school and become a doctor. Mine were really clear. I was going to learn about trauma, how it affects the body and the mind, and then I'd become a doctor, and I would know how to help children heal from their trauma. This was because I had known trauma as a child. I was sexually abused by an uncle many times. My parents couldn't face it, so there was no help for many years. But I did eventually get help from a very special psychiatrist. He was a big man and a big storyteller with a booming voice. And he told me I was like a pearl in an oyster, not this ugly, dirty thing that I thought I was. He could make me believe anything, but basically it all boiled down to one thing. I was good when I had spent so many years believing that I was bad. So there was this day when I came to his office and I said to him, I'm going to be a doctor. And he smiled this big smile and he said, of course you are. And I thought, did he not know that I had been an art major in college who had never taken a single math or science course? But he had these magical powers, and I figured he got them in med school. So I was going to go there, and I was going to get them too. But how to begin? I knew my psychiatrist believed in me, but I figured I better go and get some proof that I could do this. So I signed up for 2 GED classes, one in algebra and one in chemistry. And if I got A's, I would take it as a sign that I could do this. I did well. So the next step was the pre-med courses. I learned that Columbia University had the toughest program. They proudly failed 70% of the people in their post-bac pre-med classes. Okay, I thought this would really be proof if I could do this. So I'm going to go there. But then I realized I shouldn't be 30 when I applied to med school because I wouldn't get in, I'd be too old. So that meant I had to take organic biology, physics, and calculus in the same year. And that way I would be under 30 when I applied. I did that. I lived in the basement of a friend's house. I studied obviously all the time, but I got a 3.9 GPA. And then I thought, now this will surely be proof I can do this, proof that I belonged in med school. I was waitlisted at 11 schools and accepted at one, Cornell University Medical School. So that September, at 28 years old, I began. But the night before that first day, I noticed something happening to my voice. First, a little crackling as if I were getting a cold. But then by late evening, my voice was gone. Not laryngitis, gone. I was mute. So I was up the entire night in a total panic, saying, I can't go. This is impossible. I'm going to be so humiliated. But in the early morning, I grabbed a clipboard and I wrote on it, I am Pam, and I don't have a voice today. So the people who would become my classmates introduced themselves to me by writing on my clipboard. And as I sat down for that very first lecture, I looked around me and I was struck. I was one of just a handful of women in my entire class. And I can't imagine what my classmates thought of me, the woman with the clipboard. But they didn't embarrass me. They helped me to get through it. But that night, I drove to my therapist's office. I couldn't call him because I had no voice. I had to see him. What is this? I said, pointing to my throat. He said it was a severe stress-induced reaction to the experience of the first day of med school. He took a pause and then he looked at me and he said, you still don't believe that you belong there. He explained the power of stress to frighten, to shut us down, to induce imposter syndrome, and how powerful and excruciating it can be when you don't believe that you're worthy of something, when you don't believe that you belong. So of course I asked, will I get my voice back and how long will it take? And he said, it takes 2 weeks to get used to anything new like this. I did think he might be making that up, but I trusted him. And I started counting down the days, going to class with my clipboard, feeling myself settle in. And yes, the voice came back in just under 2 weeks. So here are the 2 big things I learned. From my therapist, I learned that trust is the antidote to stress. It is. It just melts it away. And that belonging would become the most powerful antidote to imposter syndrome. I would come to learn the biology of all of this in med school, but I also learned I wasn't alone in my feelings. Turns out that one of my classmates and my partner for my clinical rotations was Mae Jemison, a woman who forged a path through incredible barriers to get to med school and went on to become the first Black woman to go to space. Unlike me, Mae knew in kindergarten that she wanted to be a scientist. And when her teacher said, don't you mean a nurse? Mae said, no, I mean a scientist. Still, even with that confidence and a good foundation in place, including an uncle who explained Einstein's theory of relativity to her at 6, there were obstacles to belonging and access to her highest aspirations because of gender and race. But for me, Mae was a bright star and a kindred spirit. We fired each other up, we protected each other, and we grew because of each other. So med school turned out to be this amazing universe of its own where mysteries were unpacked every single day. I learned about the complex biological mechanisms that explain all of the things that we are able to do, and not just the obvious things like how our hearts and lungs work, but also how we love, how we attach, how we become conscious of ourselves, how we nurture, and how we heal after things go wrong. So I will never forget the moment in a med school lecture where I heard this, that there are 20,000 genes in our human genome, but in our lifetime, fewer than 10% will ever get expressed. And I remember thinking, well, what determines what's in that 10%? It's context, the environments, experiences, and relationships in our lives. The risks, but also the opportunities in development and learning sit inside this one profoundly important point, that there is no separation of nature and nurture, biology and environment, brain and behavior, only a collaboration between them. Genes, I learned, are chemical followers. They are little packages of protein with lots of receptors on their surface that are triggered into action by our environments and relationships. So this means genes are not the driver of who we become. Context drives the expression of our genes, and by context, we're speaking of relationships like the one I had with my therapist who taught me that trauma is not destiny. And the relationship I had with May, who had my back and would never let me give up. It's about our families, our communities, our schools, our teachers, our friends, and the safety and belonging that we experience along the way because of them. Developmental and learning science tell an optimistic story about what is possible for all of us, and especially our children. Because human brains and bodies and abilities are malleable to experience, because the brain is a dynamic living structure made up of tissue that is the most susceptible to change from experience of any tissue in the human body. And the brain is malleable over time. Most of its growth happens after we're born. So there are multiple opportunities to catch up along the way. This was surely my story. So there are 3 things I want you to remember about brain development: the astounding malleability of the human brain, experience-dependent growth, and the role of context. But to understand how context gets under the skin and into our brains, I have to tell you about the limbic system, because the limbic system is where learning happens. It consists of 3 structures: the prefrontal cortex for focus and attention, the hippocampus for working memory, and the amygdala, the emotion center of the brain. Now, these structures are intimately interconnected and cross-wired, and they develop together. And the limbic system is loaded with receptors for 2 hormonal systems, one that responds to love and one that responds to stress. And this is not an accident. Cortisol is our primary stress hormone, and oxytocin is often called the trust or love hormone. And these hormones get released because of experiences in our lives, and they carry chemical messages about these experiences to the very same target in the brain, the limbic system. So when we ask the question, how does context get inside the brain and the body? This is what we mean. Stress is the most common naturally occurring example of negative context. When we experience stress, cortisol floods our body and our brains, and this is what caused me to become mute that night before med school started. It's intense when it happens, but if the stress is mild or tolerable, it's adaptive. It helps us prepare to be alert and sharp for a test or a performance. This is our limbic system at work: attention, concentration, focus, memory, all supporting strong performance. But if the stress is unrelenting and it is not buffered by the presence and the support of someone we trust, the hormone cortisol can do a lot of damage to the structures in the limbic system as they're developing. This is because adversity doesn't just happen to children. It happens inside their brains and bodies because of the biologic mechanism of stress. But that's not the end of the story. There is a big upside when we turn to the hormone oxytocin. This is the system that produces feelings of trust, love, belonging, and safety. And that's not all. Oxytocin hits the same structures in the brain as cortisol. But oxytocin is the more powerful because it can literally protect children at the cellular level from the damaging effects of cortisol. This is why the effects of trauma are reversible. I want to say that again. This is why the effects of trauma are reversible, not the events, but the feelings and emotions are. And this is why trauma is not destiny. And why when we speak about the human relationship, We're not just talking about being nice to a child. We're speaking about a connection that is built through presence and trust, the kind that can make you believe something about yourself that you couldn't have imagined without this person's presence in your life. This is what my doctor did for me, and this is what May did for me. So it makes me completely crazy when people talk about relationships as the soft stuff. Our brains are electrical structures, and their primary energy source is human connection. And as the brain gets increasingly wired, this is called Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together, wire together. And as this happens, we become able to do increasingly complex things, whether it's reading, riding a bike, or building a robot. Take a look at this PET scan of a brain reading. Look at the different structures lighting up. Sight, hearing, comprehension, expression, all of those different structures getting connected because of the experience of reading. And it is those connections between neurons that produce all of the complex skills we build as we grow. And the power source driving this wiring of the brain, it is human connection. And there is still more. Oxytocin sets up the conditions for curiosity and exploration. This is the state where our minds open up to possibility. It's a state of readiness to absorb new things, where creativity can blossom because we don't fear embarrassment or ostracism. A state where feedback is not only welcome because there's trust, we're drawn to it. Like food if we're hungry, or water if we're thirsty, we go toward it. We have to, because curiosity is a drive state. You've had this experience. Think about it. We all have. Picture that state in your mind, that feeling where you just want more, want to do more. Chemically speaking, curiosity is most like a biological drive that is seeking satisfaction. It could be knowledge we're introduced to and we want more of it. It could be a new skill, and a coach helps us see why our goal is within reach. The chemical in charge of all of this is a neurotransmitter called dopamine. The dopamine pathway is our salience and reward pathway, and it gets released when we're introduced to something that is new, that matters to us a lot, and it's often because it's introduced by someone who matters to us a lot, and we want more of it. So we go toward it. We feel satisfied. We get rewarded for our curiosity, and then we want more. Think about being lost in a book and you don't know where the time went. Think about a time when someone showed you something you absolutely believed you couldn't do, and then you did it. That feeling that you get, that's a rush, and it's dopamine. So the neural cocktail that is producing this kind of experience is oxytocin and dopamine. Now, you have experienced this yourselves. This is the biology of learning. And we can build conditions where this kind of learning is not only possible, it's essential. This is the secret sauce of human development and learning, because the development of a whole person emerges when we create experiences like this that connect to one another. Lots of connections that happen between the structures of the brain, all fueled by relationships and experiences. And trust, mediated by oxytocin and relationships, well, that sets up the conditions where we feel safe, safe to risk, safe to experiment, conditions that ignite curiosity. Curiosity is the fuel that lets us know what we're capable of. At the beginning of the 20th century, we didn't know this. We didn't know how the brain develops. We didn't know how the brain gets wired for learning. We built an entire education system that was never designed to develop the learner. So you have to think about that. An education system that wasn't designed to develop a learner. It wasn't designed for equity, and it wasn't designed to unlock the potential in each and every young person. For example, We believed that genes were the drivers of who we become, including our intelligence. Today we know genes are chemical followers. We believed that talent was scarce and distributed like a bell curve, with most students in the middle, so we built the system to select and sort. Today we know that talent is everywhere, and there are many, many pathways to developing it. For the better part of a century, we believed that an average score stood for an individual. Today we know that an average rarely represents an individual. We believed that a factory model requiring lots of memorization was a good and efficient way of educating kids. And today we know that agency and engagement matter far more to higher order skill building. And we believed that the potential of a young person was knowable in advance. Today we know that we can't see potential unless we design the environments to reveal it. If we standardize the approach to building talent and skill, for sure, it'll work for some kids, it has, but not for many others. We know we've reached the limit of what is achievable through standardized approaches to learning, just like other fields have. And if we know this to be true, should we continue to offer menus of labels and interventions, or conceive of something very new, a bold, equitable purpose and design for education and learning, one that is encompassing, relationship-rich, holistic, rigorous, and profoundly engaging of students' interests and capabilities. Today, we know we can use the science of learning and development to unlock learning pathways for every single child, no matter where their journeys begin. In 1984, the 2 Sigma study by Benjamin Bloom demonstrated that building highly favorable conditions into all of the environments in which children go and learn would put many children on the path to realizing their fullest potential, and all children on the path to equity of experience and opportunity. His proxy for highly favorable conditions was an individual tutor. He found that he could take a student performing at the 50th percentile and move them up 2 standard deviations through the experience of individual tutoring. But here's the thing. When he studied his data, he realized that the active ingredient that generated the outcomes that he got was not the content alone. It was the content and the connection, the nature of the relationship to the tutor, the belief and belonging contained in that relationship. He was observing the biology of learning in action. So now I'm going to show you a video. This is one of 34 from the How Learning Happens series that we did with George Lucas's organization, Edutopia, and Linda Darling Hammond. This series has had over 15 million views, and this one is called Building a Culture of Safety and Belonging.
Anything else special happened this weekend, friends?
In the pool, I did a cannonball. I know how to swim.
You know how to swim?
I know. I do. Blow bubbles underwater.
You
Me
do?
too.
As human beings, one of the most essential needs we have is the need to belong. In school, children need a sense of belonging to be able to be productive learners. They need to be connected to their fellow students, connected to their teachers, to also be affirmed in who they are in a way that is positive and accepting.
I don't take swimming lessons.
In a belonging classroom, there's a community being explicitly built. The teacher knows each child and things about each of those children that they can mention and draw on.
I pay attention, I listen. I'm really invested in what they tell me. The students feeling loved, students feeling nurtured, students feeling like they have a place at school, they're safe. It activates their brain cells.
What side were you?
Sense of belonging is one of the most important activators of a child's engagement in learning. Everything about activating a child's cognitive skills begins with activating their social connectedness. The energy for learning is coming from the social connection that children have.
But in the end, we're trying to come up with an agreement.
Excellent.
We're not going to comment, question. We're only going to encourage. Because they're culturally and linguistically diverse students, I want to really make sure that we are making them feel connections. All the writing we do in our class, it's very much about them. It helps them, promotes them to find their own voice and to share their stories.
Sometimes people think every Muslim person is a target or is a terrorist.
Thank you, Anissa.
What did this show us about what we are good at as a group?
Working together, because we often argue a lot.
Today, we did an activity that was really designed to get them thinking about how they're going to support each other. I think that reiterating the idea that we're in this together, I think it's hard to find the time, but doing some team building exercises at the beginning of the year and revisiting them can really help illustrate that point.
In a belonging classroom, they have a community that may meet in classroom meetings to problem solve together, to read stories together, to tell successes and accomplishments or important events together. They celebrate like families do, things that each other have done or have experienced.
Let's talk about what we admire about some of our friends.
I admire Zara because she is so compassionate.
And where we're talking about being compassionate and being supportive of one another, gets to build that deeper connection for everyone, just to feel like this is their school family, this is somewhere they're loved, they're nurtured, they're taken care of, they're valued.
Thank you for speaking.
The community becomes a place where you can bring your emotions, your fears, your needs. You can be honest about what's going on and know that there will be acceptance, support, and love that's available to carry you through.
We all can work together and we all can try to strategize together and create a better pathway for others to be successful. And we can make it fun.
They're working together. They take care of each other, not just personally, but academically.
We're always pushing each other.
I don't know about you, but I love seeing and feeling classrooms where relationships are at the center. But we know that relationships can't do it all. We also know that the insights from brain and learning science align profoundly with what so many parents know about their kids and want for their kids, and what teachers have been saying for years, that we can create learning environments and a system that recognizes children as whole people, values their assets, and gives them belief, confidence, and a fierce sense of belonging, so they don't settle for anything less than their highest aspirations. The message in the science is clear. We need a new design, mapped to the way the brain grows and children learn. A design that combines positive developmental relationships, environments filled with safety and belonging, rich, meaningful learning experiences so that students do discover what they're capable of, the intentional development of the critical habits, skills, and mindsets that all successful learners have, and of course, integrated supports. Linda Darling-Hammond with the Learning Policy Institute and I with my organization, Turnaround for Children, now called the Center for Whole Child Education at Arizona State University. We co-authored a playbook called Design Principles for Schools that goes into detail and shows you how to operationalize these 5 core elements together. The playbook is filled with stories elevating where this is going on today, as well as the tools and resources that can make this possible for any school or district. But here's the secret sauce. The development of a whole child emerges when we combine these elements into experiences that connect to one another. And if you want to picture this, picture a shape like a web of experiences, because this is how our brains actually develop. Lots of connections that happen between the structures of the brain, and it is these connections that will fuel the development of increasingly complex skills and competencies, all fueled by experiences. Our kids can't do what we're asking of them today without fuel. Fuel that ignites engagement, motivation, and of course, learning, including and especially the ability to surmount challenges and disappointments, like the fuel that powered me into my purpose and May into space. So now let's imagine what would happen to the motivation, engagement, and learning of every young person if every environment were designed using the principles of whole child design, and every relationship they were in gave them the coaching, the mentoring, the sense of belonging that increased cognitive muscle, pushed challenge, provided encouragement, and of course, celebrated successes. Think about the agency we would harness and the curiosity and learning we would ignite. So much of learning is about building cognitive muscle. That's what one of my heroes, the author, teacher, educator, Zaretta Hammond, calls it. Cognitive muscle. It's about how much cognitive load you can carry. And the bottom line is one of our most important jobs in driving rigorous learning is to help kids carry more and more cognitive load, using their energy, their drive, their agency, because it is their motivation and engagement that will determine whether we and they succeed or fail. And we can help them do that. I don't know how many of you remember the movie The Karate Kid, but Zaretta says that every teacher needs to be a Mr. Miyagi and every student a Daniel, because Mr. Miyagi supported Daniel and believed in him. But that's not all. He pushed him to work harder, to build skills, to take risks with his performance. We can do that as teachers, coaches, and parents. We can support and push. And the science of motivation backs this up, because the word motivation comes from the Latin movere, to move. And this is a big clue to where motivation comes from. It is about being moved. It is about engaging our emotions. It comes from belief. I want to perform at my best. It comes from purpose. I want to change the world. It's about control and focus. I can focus my energy and my actions and reach my goals. This is the biology of learning in action. And learning scientists like Richard Clark, Boris Saxberg tell us that this kind of motivation accounts for 30% of all learning. So one final thought to leave you with. If Mozart, Martin Luther King, or Mae Jemison existed in a classroom designed the way many of our classrooms are still designed today, it is more than likely we wouldn't even know that they were there, because we've not yet gotten to the right answers about human learning, human performance, and unlocking human potential, because we have not been asking enough of the right questions. Specifically, what are the forces that define the expression of human potential, the developmental range of individual performance, the acquisition of competencies at greater and greater levels of performance, no matter where a person begins, and what experiences, environments, and relationships are necessary to get those results. How did I become me? How did May become May? Well, it starts with this mind-blowing insight that context and relationships grow the brain, trigger the expression of our genes, harness the brain's astonishing malleability to unleash the potential in each and every child. For Mae Jemison, the sky was never the limit, and it shouldn't be for any of us. Thank you all so much for letting me join you today.
Thank you, Dr. Cantor. Thank you so much. We're actually going to go ahead and transition into our student panel just because of the time that we have, and we'll save time for questions at the end. I'd like to invite our guest, our student panel, to come and join me on the stage. We will take questions at the end, so I think that we will do that from the microphones if you're here in person. If you're joining us online, please just go ahead and submit a question in the question and answer box, and we will make sure to bring your voice into the auditorium space. So I am so happy to be joined by this wonderful panel. We have Jescie Tinio joining us, Francisco Ciraulo, and also Quinn McDonald, who have joined us to talk with us today. We thought that what we would do is do a quick exercise so that you could get to know us better, called I Am. We will say 5 I Ams that describe something about ourselves. I'll model it, and then everyone will join in. So for example, I am an African American woman. I am an educator. I am an auntie. I am the daughter of Eugene Thomas Chism and Laura Arlene White. And I am passionate about equity in education. So Jessie, do you want to go ahead and jump in for us? Yeah.
Hi. I am a creative and academically driven student. I am a Filipino American woman. I am an environmental scientist. I am an intern at the USGSB lab, and I am the president of my Earth Optimism Club.
Wonderful.
Is this mic working? Or am I
yes, we can hear you great.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Francisco Ciraulo. I am first a student. I attended a Title I public high school in Sacramento, California, and I'm currently a rising sophomore at Stanford University. I'm also a son who grew up in a family where my mom worked at my local art museum, and that was a really formative experience for me. I'm going to cheat a little bit with my last three. I am Chinese American, I'm Italian American, and I'm also Mexican American. So that being mixed race has been a very strong part of my identity, going through all the different learning spaces I've been through growing up.
Thank you.
And is my mic working?
Yes, we can hear you great, Quinn.
So for my 5, I am an artist. I am part of the Teen Art Lab Collective here at the Hirshhorn. I am a homeschooler. I've been homeschooled my entire life. I am a high school junior. I am a violinist. I have been playing also most of my entire life since I was about 3, so many, many years. And I'm also a traveler. I lived in Australia for 5 years.
Wow, okay, great. Thank you, Quinn. Dr. Cantor, would you like to share anything else?
Well, I am someone you know a little bit right now, so I am only going to say that everything that I've learned by learning science tells me that each of us has an enormous amount of potential inside us to be and become who we want to be. It is an unshakable belief with a lot of evidence behind it. So I believe that it is our job and our commitment to unlock that for every single child.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so let's jump into our questions. Each one of you has some kind of connection to the Smithsonian. So Jessie, you are part of our Earth Optimism Club. Francisco, you were part of our Youth Ambassador Program for the National Museum of the American Latino. And Quinn, you are a participant in the Art Lab here at the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. And so talk to me just a little bit. Do you recall a project or something that you engaged in with one of the Smithsonian programs that helped you find or connect to your own voice? And we can have anyone start. Francisco, you want to start? Or Jessie, you want to start? It looks like you were going.
Yeah, so definitely since we're on the topic of my involvement in Earth Optimism, we actually started with, when I was in sophomore year, I'm a rising senior now, In my sophomore year, in my AP government class, we were involved with the Smithsonian in our requirement to kind of come up with environmentally driven projects in groups from the classroom. So I had a project that I focused on with two of my other peers. It was about e-waste, which is electronic waste, and we noticed that we had an abundance of old, not even old, but just technology that we weren't using anymore, just cycling in and out of the school. And we noticed there isn't really a way that people know of to properly dispose of said e-waste. And we came up with different solutions and such, like incorporating them into maybe a mural or an art project. And I even came up with cycling them into jewelry and just recycling. And we came up with different ways of spreading awareness about how to dispose of different wastes that people just have like a lot of because of things like fast fashion.
Yeah.
Like people cycle through let's say a new iPhone comes out. Someone may be tempted to just get that iPhone when their phone may be working perfectly fine. But yeah, we had to incorporate that project into a presentation and present it to a whole bunch of council and Smithsonian people that were considering funding us for our next school year to actually incorporate these different projects into our school. And so being in that position to express myself and advocate to myself as to why my cause is important really helped me to learn about how I should present myself in my own voice.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Jessie or Quinn? Or Francisco, I'm sorry.
I can start with some context to the program that I did. So I did the Young Ambassador program, which is through the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Latino. And so I participated in this program in the summer of 2022 as a rising college freshman. And so this program is developed for rising college freshmen who are between high school and college. And it's a two-part program which consists of a one-week Washington week, which is this very intensive part of the program where everyone is here in DC, and they go around to different museums and different spaces to both hear speakers, engage in different activities, and develop both professional skills and also their academic pursuits, which will be connected to their later one-month internship, which is the second part of the program. I was here in DC working at the National Museum of the American Latino again. Here, I have some family I was staying with. And so as part of my internship, one of the projects that I worked on was developing programming for an event at the Chism Center back in California. And so this was a really interesting project. I got to develop a project for children as they came through the event. They got to create little lenticular designs. So a lenticular is basically if you know these little like bookmarks you have in like museum gift stores which change as you rotate them. Mm-hmm. It is basically letting children create their own version of that by cutting up strips of paper and gluing them together and then having an image that changed. And so that was my big project during my internship, and that's the one that really stuck with me.
And how did that project help you connect with your own voice or your sense of self?
Yeah, so I'm mixed race, as I was very quick to point out. So the, obviously, Young Ambassador program is focused on Latino youth, and so that was really getting to connect with a part of my culture that I felt like I hadn't been able to engage with maybe as much as I wanted to before this program, so that was a good opportunity.
Great, thank you. Quinn, anything you want to share?
I'll start off with also a bit of context. So for my internship here at the Hirshhorn, essentially what our goal was to create, it ended up being only one event, to bring people our age into the museum and bring more teen engagement into the Hirshhorn. And during the first half of our program, there was a lot of like learning what other people did, learning about like different jobs within the Smithsonian and the Hirshhorn, and like a lot of just like background of learning what a lot of things are. And that was right after during a time which I had moved back from Australia. I had been dealing with a lot of health problems throughout that year before. And so that was like my big thing that I was doing, like coming back from all that and really learning how to function with all that and how to interact with people again, really being in a new country pretty much. And I felt like that really helped me connect, especially back to this country.
So the project itself of the planning and the engagement with the other students and the Smithsonian staff really helped you kind of think through the engagement part again.
Yes.
Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for sharing those. You know, Dr. Cantor talked about one of the important aspects of belonging related to trust. So when you think about what builds trust for you, what are some examples of ways in which adults or teachers or maybe even our Smithsonian educators have built trust for you? Quinn, do you want to start this time?
This is a question that even before I've thought about, in that I feel like the way that I've been interacted with a lot in the Smithsonian is as not just a child, and I feel like that as being a teenager often is this gray area where you can't be an adult yet, but you're no longer a child. Mm-hmm. And I feel really respected in that I am treated as not necessarily an adult, but not treated as a child that way, and really allowed to be myself too.
Great, thank you for that. Jessie or Francisco?
Yeah, I say that there are so many components that come into, you asked about building trust. There's just the general having a relationship with the people that you're involved with, just knowing how you interact with them, because different people interact differently. I'd say a good example of a whole trust building day I had just recently. I went on a sort of trip with other interns and a couple of my mentors, where we went to a place called Outward Bound. It was like an Outward Bound Chesapeake Bay school. And we started off with sort of an activity where we had to flip over a tarp while we're all standing on the tarp without falling off. And at the time, I only knew about 70% of the people that I was with. And I kind of have only said maybe a couple greetings to the other 30 that I didn't know. So being able to communicate with them in a situation where we had to work together was really helpful in the sense of being able to build trust with them. Because I feel like after that activity, we were all so much more comfortable with each other and were able to communicate through the tasks effectively.
I love that. So an actual authentic task where you had to rely on each other help to build that trust in that relationship. Okay. You have anything to add?
Yeah, I
Francisco?
think with regards to trust, I think something that's been really important for me personally is that I grew up as a very, very, very shy kid. I mean, I still think I consider myself an introvert, but I think being seen as seeing different students as they are is really important to me. And I know like Susan Cain has written very extensively about the importance of introverts and especially like growing up as an introvert. And so I think like seeing different learning environments as I've kind of gone through different schools, I feel like I've gotten different perspectives on how different teachers approach kind of the diversity of students and different learning styles. In particular, my 8th grade teacher did, I feel like, a really good job reaching out to us. And he had this was not like implemented by the school, this was entirely his own initiative to create a student-led podcast for our 8th grade class. And so I feel like that was a really good opportunity for me to be able to voice my own opinions and feelings in like this very controlled environment that was like set up by my teacher. That really helped me.
So each of you have touched on, and Dr. Cantor, please jump in if you want to jump in. Just give me a signal or something, okay? Each one of you talked a little bit about some of the components that help to build trust. So the relationship, the communication style, the reinforcement of being able to be put in an environment where you felt you could succeed, being able to be respected for being yourself. So all these kind of components of things that help to build trust. Could you share with us some examples of things maybe that have diminished trust, or things that didn't make the environment feel safe for you, or places where you didn't feel like it was a welcoming space that you could maybe thrive in? Are there examples that you can share with us related to that?
I can take this one first. In my senior year of high school, I found a way to take a class at a local college, at a CSU college at Sacramento State. I took like an intro to ethics class with a teacher or a professor I'd been familiar with due to a previous summer program. And in the class, so he's a Chinese American professor, I'm half Chinese, and at one point, a lot of the class was just talking about different, just like ethical dilemmas, ethical issues. And at one point he asked if him being Chinese American influenced how we saw him as a teacher. And I felt that it did for me to see like that representation like as like in the field of philosophy, which is very underrepresented. And no one else in the class raised their hand when he asked that question. And for me, that was very telling that people don't want to talk about identity or are very like hesitant to be forthright in talking about it. And I felt like, to me, it was important to see that representation, but I felt like my other peers didn't really want to talk about it as much as I did.
So sometimes even a non-action is a loud signal about how comfortable people might be talking about certain things. So in that situation, the fact that nobody responded and said that it was something that they saw was an indication for you that they probably weren't comfortable talking about that. And very interesting. Any examples, Quinn or Jessie, for you?
Yeah, I'd say I definitely agree with what he was saying, and I thought of the example of like everyone has just had this shared experience of being part of some sort of group, whether it's to work on a project or just working as their own little group on something else. But there are always people that do respond, don't respond, like lay back, and then there are like the leaders. But then there are also those people who you trust to complete a certain task. Let's say you're splitting up a workload of some sort, and they don't exactly get it done, which is really
I don't know anybody like that.
Yeah, it's very discouraging to a person that may have put so much of their energy and time into their part, while expecting the other person to come through with some sort of response to that. But then it's very diminishing when you don't feel like you're getting the same effort that you put in back to yourself.
Right. So not delivering on a promise or something that they're supposed to do. Right. Absolutely. Quinn, anything you want to offer or share?
I'm not sure that I can think of anything like particular.
It's fine. Yeah.
But I agree with what the other two were saying.
One of the things that I think as educators, librarians, administrators, leaders in the learning spaces, museum educators, that we are constantly thinking about is, how are we preparing the young people and the youth that we engage with for the future? And I'd love to hear from your own perspective, your outlook on the future. Are you feeling optimistic? Do you feel encouraged, inspired? When you think about your future in particular, share with us a little bit about how you're seeing the future.
I guess I can take this one.
Okay.
But I'd say in general, I'm pretty comfortable with my ability to push through certain tasks, whether they're challenging or not. So while I am perfectly okay with being comfortable, I've always been driven to push myself towards something that it's like, okay, I might be able to do that, but even if I'm not so certain in myself, my ability to do that, then I would come up with some sort of task, schedule kind of, to get myself to the point where I want to be.
Great.
And so far, I've found that I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I get to places. If I told myself a year ago that I'd be doing the things that I've done recently, it's like, huh? What? Yeah.
And you accomplished that by making goals for yourself or making a list or thinking, how did you accomplish that?
it's a step-by-step process. So if I know that I want to be in a certain place by a certain time, then I can look at however much time I have and kind of be like, okay, by this time I want to be able to be okay with doing this, or I want to be in this position, and so on.
Okay, so small incremental ideas and growth patterns. Great.
I think seeing so many books banned and everything, it's been very easy to be pessimistic about the outlook for schools in general. I can give an optimistic point though. I went to, again, a public high school in Sacramento, and my freshman year was the first year that ethnic studies was implemented as a class, as a required class at my high school. So I was part of the guinea pig year of the first year of it being implemented. And I feel like that was a really, great and very optimistic outlook for the direction that schools can go in. It may not be reflective of the overall trajectory, but I think to me it was really meaningful to see that. And for our final project, I was able to do this kind of like build your own final project where I took photos and wrote about the three different photos I took representing my 3 different cultures. And that was really meaningful to me. And I made this like poster board with papel picado from my parents' wedding as the backdrop. And my teacher liked it so much that she ended up keeping it and using it as a model for future years. And so I feel like seeing that class implemented in my year especially was really a good outlook for me.
I love how you put together kind of the reality of what's going on around book bans and the impact that it's happening, but the optimism around the inclusion of an ethnic studies course that gives you hope and an optimistic perspective about where we can go as a nation. So often that's how it is. There's this balance, right? Something that happens and then a counter reaction. And Dr. Cantor, I see you're trying to get in.
Well, I think that there are some remarkable insights in the conversation that you're having right now. So I just want to highlight a couple of things to make sure they're visible.
Excellent.
One is how important authentic purpose is to each of these young people. Mm-hmm. A lot of what they have overcome has happened because they were engaged in something that was not rote memorization. It was something that had a deep purpose and in many instances a personal sense of purpose. That's one thing. And I hear that over and over again from young people. The second thing is that small gestures that convey that you are seen and that your contributions are noticed. Sometimes we think this has to be a giant celebration or there's something big that has to happen, but the gestures of being visible and noticed, either if you're struggling, but especially if you contribute something, is just so dramatically important to young people. And that noticing can happen from a fellow peer, and it can certainly happen from adults. So it's the visibility versus invisibility. It's purpose versus things that are shallow and hollow that I wanted to highlight.
Thank you so much for helping to connect those dots. Quinn, I know that you're an emerging artist, and so when you think about the future and your path towards maybe exploring more of your artistic expression, what are the things that you're putting in place to help you do that?
I feel like my work over the past year with the Hirshhorn has really helped with that, and just getting to see that whole other world and also being part of this world in DC. Like there have been a lot of things over the past year that make me have not so much optimism, but I feel like my real hope is the people in my generation, the people that I've gotten to interact with thanks to the Smithsonian, because I wouldn't say that otherwise. I interact with such normal people. I interact with a lot of homeschooled people, not necessarily the average people, but I have a lot of hope for the people of my generation and fixing a lot of the things.
I do too. I do too. You guys have to. You have to fix it. Okay, no pressure. So let's go ahead and move to some questions from the audience. Again, we have the mics here in the auditorium, or if you're online, please submit questions through the Q&A. I see Ashley is already at one of our microphones, so do we have some from the out audience?
Yes. So from the virtual audience, Sandy asks, it's so important for students to learn about how their brains work. How do we get schools to prioritize this in learning environments? And are there any existing programs or tips for integrating these insights into my teaching?
Dr. Cantor, I think that one's for you if you want to start us off.
Sure. There is an enormous amount of interest from the teaching profession now in learning about the science of learning and development. Certainly, there is a wealth of information on our website, which is now, as I told you, the Center for Whole Child Education at ASU, and my website. We are trying to make this information available, and more importantly, available in forms like the video I showed you that are immediately accessible to practitioners. So I would urge you to check out these resources initially. The other thing is that when you look at, and I think someone mentioned EL education or Outward Bound, but these are actual networks of schools that are incorporating the science of learning and development in everything that they do. So this is not a secret anymore. This is a movement in the making. It began in 2016, and it is gathering a great deal of momentum now.
Great, thank you. Our next question.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I swerved from a career in the corporate world to teaching and found my purpose and love it. And in my experiences, what all that you have touched on resonates so well and seems almost common sense in some ways. I know it's not always, but it rings true. But sometimes, whether you're in the classroom or in real life, there's sort of a crisis or something, some stressful moment. And I'd love everybody's thoughts on ways to address those moments of crisis in a calm way to make people feel listened. I have a teenage child who was at camp this summer, and when she returned, she said, I'm not happy with the management or the administrative staff. There was some sexual harassment, and she felt that some of the girls were not listened to. A week went by, and the administration, I think, had time to think about it and calm down, and it was addressed. But they didn't address it well in the moment. And when I'm with my small 3-year-old, sometimes it's stressful, and I probably don't react as well as I could to make sure they're all listened to. So those are my real life experiences. I'd love your thoughts. Thanks.
Could I maybe paraphrase and you tell me if I get it right or not? So what I heard you say, I think, is sometimes adults don't react appropriately all the time. What are the ways in which youth, young adults, could signal or communicate that they're not being heard or recognized, and when they bring these things to our attention? Is that a good paraphrase?
Yes, that's a great paraphrase.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd actually say that a good way, because sometimes it's just hard in general, like not only with adults, but with just people that you are not familiar with. I think the best way that someone that's more like in our position rather than the teacher position is just for us to be just straightforward, honestly. If there's something bothering, like, yes, it may be a little difficult to be honest and straightforward with people that you don't exactly know or aren't comfortable with, but I think that's the most effective way to get a point across. Just express a concern, maybe show an example of how this is this, and then maybe provide an example of how you think something should be handled.
Thank you.
I think something that can be helpful is a reframing of the student-teacher dynamic and understanding it as a two-way path that goes back and forth, where the student can learn from the teacher, but the teacher can also learn from the student. I think that is a really good way to build trust between kind of both sides and make communication a lot more easy.
Quinn, anything you want to add?
I would agree with both of them.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Cantor.
I thought something to share at this moment might apply. to what's being talked about, particularly the comment about the two-way street. One of the things that we have is a practice called the 2x10. And when a student is really upset about something, what we teach teachers to do is to spend 2 minutes just listening to that student once a day over 10 days. And the act of listening and of listening over time has tremendously powerful effects on allowing someone to get into that calmer state where they can start to reflect on what's happened. The 2x10 is easy. It's reproduced by millions and millions of people today in learning settings, and actually I think has some applicability in a home setting as well, because it emphasizes the power of listening and connection.
And that's called 2x10.
Yes.
And we can find that on the website also that you mentioned?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Our next question.
Hi, Loretta Goodwin from the Aurora Institute. Hi, Dr. Cantor. It's really great to hear you again. And I really appreciate all you shared. And my question really is for the students. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about how you build that sense of belonging among your peers as a group, because we've heard a lot about the connection between teachers and students, but I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about peer connections and that creating that sense of belonging in a group.
I'd say that just activities where students can work together and just be more social. Because I know some students may see like the general thing of school, like association, to just be like, sit quietly in a classroom, do this work. I don't think that's the most effective way to actually help students build a sense of belonging within themselves, because it doesn't allow them to learn more about each other or just share their own experiences. So I think that if students have more opportunities to actually get to know one another or just have some sort of fun shared experience or have something to celebrate together or something, you can do pep rallies, you can have assemblies. Just activities like that just help students feel a lot more connected to each other and feel like they don't stand out. And especially if something like the sense of them not being judged, if it's pointed out that a student won't be judged for their opinion, then they might feel more comfortable with speaking out for themselves and voicing their thoughts, which could be really fruitful to everyone else around them.
That's great. I know that we have one more question to take, so I'm gonna jump on that question, and then we'll circle back to see if there's anything people want to add to that also.
Hi, my name is Michaela Bush, and in grad school I studied self-efficacy, and so I'm wondering for the students, do you recall a time in your education where you noticed that you actually had your own belief in yourself to achieve and succeed? And for Dr. Cantor, are there any new research that you've seen about how something can affect self-efficacy in students?
So why don't we start with Dr. Cantor, and then I'm going to merge this question with our closing. So what I'm hearing from the question is, was there a point in time when you recognized like your own empowerment? And what was that? And then Dr. Cantor, is there any new research about self-efficacy? So why don't we start with Dr. Cantor, and then we'll move to our student panel.
I don't think that I would start off by saying it's new research, but I would tell you that self-efficacy is something that has been studied as a crucial building block skill that often depends on other skills being developed as well. So issues like relational connection that affords a young person a sense that they are believed in and that an adult or a peer has confidence in them are the kinds of things that are going to cause them to want to try something, to want to experiment with something. And when they begin to have indicators of success by doing that, you begin to get that positive flywheel. I think that one of the students talked about doing something with others and beginning to feel as because you are part of a peer group and solving a problem together, that something happens to your own ability to be confident in the thing that you're bringing. So a lot of what we know about self-efficacy are precisely the solutions that each of these students have talked about, either in their schools or in their internships that we've heard today.
Thank you. So anyone want to respond to that? Was there a point or a time when you recognized that you started to feel confident or encouraged by something?
I think I can go. One instance was about, it was a year ago from now, so during my 5 years in Australia, I was not really able to play violin the same way. I lived very much so in the middle of nowhere. There was a fiddle group that I started playing with towards the end, but that still wasn't the same. All of my classes were over Zoom. And so I didn't really know how to play with other people. And so I just wasn't at all used to that. And I even had points which I was like, why am I still doing this? A couple of times in my life, my mom did ask and was like, do you still want to do this? And it was like, what else am I going to do? It's such a part of me. And I remember last year, there is a violin camp every year with this sort of organization. And it is 5 days in a week, and it is like 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day, just solid violin playing. And I remember that when I started going there, I started to really realize how much I know how to play, but also how amazing it is just playing with the people around me and getting to be part of that.
Thank you, Quinn. Thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful example, so thank you so much. We are actually out of time, but I want to ask our students to share with us just something that you want us to remember about how to create a sense of belonging for students. So we have a group of educators that are committed to working with youth across the nation. What is something you want us to remember? Jessie, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Something that's just been ringing through my head this whole time is the importance of reflection, whether that's from the adult's point of view or a student's point of view, because it helps us learn about who we are, and knowing that we'll be able to figure out our best course of action. And it's so important to have a relationship with other people knowing who you are, because you get to then figure out with that person, like, okay, we work together this way well, or maybe not so much this way.
Reflection. Wonderful. Francisco.
I think the point I'd like to leave off on is kind of that you should take advantage of the position that you're in and the power that an individual can have on influencing, especially in education, a lot of people. And for me, it's really stood out how different teachers that I've had throughout the years have taken their own initiative to do something unique with their class that's really powerfully changed my takeaway from that class. And I think like the example I gave earlier was with my 8th grade teacher who started a podcast. And I think it's really powerful how those small actions can really have very strong impacts on the students. And it's not something that's implemented necessarily by the school, but as an individual, you can really go out of your way to do something additional that can be very helpful to the development of youth. So.
Great, thank you. Small things mean a lot. Okay, Quinn.
And I sensed that question about how to make people our age feel listened to. I haven't had an answer kind of ringing through my head, is that the best way to make someone feel listened to is to listen to what they have to say.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, that concludes our session. Thank you for being here. Just a reminder to come back and join us for our closing keynote at 2:30. I don't know. Ashley, what time's our closing keynote? 3 o'clock? 2:30? 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, right back here, enjoying the sessions in between, and we'll see you later today for our closing session with LA Unified School District and Finder Play Foundation. Thank you.